Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
It's going well. We've made it into 2026, and I hope the same for you. We are here with 3 questions today, which I am excited for. Did we want to tease those, Molly, and what we're talking about today?
Yes, we are talking, I'm going to go backwards order. We're talking creatine. We're talking getting faster without leaning into every single interval trend, very important. And we're talking road rides for mountain bikers, which I think is very relevant to where we are right now. We are home in New Jersey, or at my ancestral home in New Jersey for the holidays. And normally this involves a lot of trails, a lot of mountain biking, a lot of trail running. But this year has just been icy. Mm-hmm. So a lot more indoor training for you. Even the roads, it's been hard to get outside to ride. So I think this is a very relevant question. But yeah, I mean, how is your start to 2026 going? Happy birthday, by the way.
Okay, yes.
The big 4-2.
Yeah, it's been tough. And I think the seasonal stuff, I don't know if I'm getting soft or if it's just been icy. I think there actually has been some ice storm across a lot of the, what would we say, the Midwest all the way through a lot of the East Coast. I know people in Maine. I know even up in northern Canada, there's been a lot of ice and just different conditions. The winter's been okay for cross-country skiing and where for those who do that. But yeah, it's been a tougher year, I think, at least for me. I don't know if I'm getting soft or what's going on, but yeah. So there's been less mountain biking anyhow.
But you've still been training and getting in the reps, getting in the trainer time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we've been still keeping up strength training and a bit of running. So yeah, I think things are moving along, but it's going to look different, right? And I guess that's sometimes what happens. We have this idea of like what the ideal training might look like, but very quickly, I know even in California right now, there's rainstorms. So I see some of the pros are out trying to do some hikes, or they're in exercise gyms doing things. Well, maybe they can't ride outdoors because of torrential rain or things like that too. So we do have to be adaptable as athletes, and with Consummate Athlete, that is why we like cross training, is so that we are prepared to sort of thrive in these different environments.
Yeah. And I mean, we had our last 2 episodes were all goal setting, mental toughness, etc. I'm actually really psyched with how many people enjoyed both episodes on mental toughness and how we might need to rethink what it means. And I think this is actually a great example of it, because I think in the past, mental toughness would have meant going and riding outside in the snow and the sleet and the ice storm, instead of being actually more mentally flexible. And instead of you doing a 5-hour road ride, you're doing some time on the trainer, and then you're going for a run and you're doing strength. So I think your mental toughness is really doing well.
Right. And so, yeah, I think that's a valid point, that you want to be careful with what you're doing, I guess. But I think it's great that people did enjoy that. We did make the gamble of putting those episodes out during the holiday season. So if you haven't listened to those, they are very much about sort of training and mental toughness, very little on the goal setting New Year's resolution. So if you sort of tune out from podcasts, which I understand with New Year's resolutions, definitely go back and check those out, because those are 2 really valuable episodes with Scott and Aaron.
Yes, and even though I'm like mad at you because I realized today they're named almost exactly the same thing, although I kind of find that really fun, so I'm okay with it. Mm-hmm. They're named the same thing because I'm asking a lot of the same questions, but because Aaron is a psychologist and Scott is a neuroscientist, they answer them in the way that like the answer is the same, but the approach is different, and I think different people will find like the different ways that they explain these phenomenon to be really helpful.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of these topics, we always come back to this self-talk, how we're speaking to ourselves, how we're framing the expectations we have for the training, why we're doing the training. So a lot of the concepts are similar, but I think these are really the fundamental things to sport performance, yes, but also probably to life. Why do we keep going? What is the thing that keeps you going when you do hit adversity? Because we know that we are going to hit adversity at some point, whether that's at the front of the race or wherever you find yourself.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's get into our first question here. We're talking road rides for mountain bikers. So the question is, for mountain bikers looking to improve fitness, is there a meaningful advantage to adding a weekly road ride with long, steady climbing versus doing similarly hard but lower elevation technical mountain bike rides?
Well, it's interesting. I saw someone sort of just proclaimed as if it was fact that mountain bikers are taking the road world by storm or something like this. I think they said mountain bikers and cyclocross. I think they were using it as sort of an example that variability in our training is good. This would be maybe against something like an erg mode, or thinking that your trainer being very steady, or maybe you might ride on a flat road because it's very steady, or ride alone because it's very steady. Those things are valuable in some doses, but to think that all your training should be this quote unquote perfect is maybe flawed. So this question's in some ways asking like the opposite. Like, if I'm a mountain biker and I mountain bike every day, should I road ride? Should I have more steady training? And I think the answer is yes. I often find that this is a big thing because we can't really mountain bike every day of the week. Once we're mountain biking for training, you can do whatever you want if you're just going out and every day you go out with your friends and you do stops and whatever you do. But when we're talking about training, there is the reality that when you start going uphill, especially off-road, it's going to be hard for most people. If we think about this as heart rate zones or power zones, it will have to surge to make it up these things, all the obstacles you have to do. And again, the climbing is just a big part of mountain biking. We want to think about this as almost recovery, but also keeping some of these other loads, like for cardiovascular system, keeping your heart and your lungs working, keeping your plasma volume, your blood profiles up. These are reasons that we would use cross-training or different disciplines to keep moving. And so certainly there's going to be benefit to adding something like a long road ride on a Sunday after you do a hard mountain bike ride on your Saturday. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, where this question gets a little more nuanced is that they say doing a similarly hard but lower elevation technical ride. Is that what they're saying?
Yeah, so you're doing more of like a long, steady climb on the road bike, but you're doing more of like a flat mountain bike ride, which is an interesting question, because I guess this person's terrain is such that like they have a really long road climb in their area, but their mountain biking is actually pretty flat, which is not what you would normally see in an area.
Maybe the trails are at a lower elevation.
Yeah, I guess maybe the trails are all down from this long climb.
Yeah, what I might have to do with this is like what caught my eye is that you wouldn't necessarily have to do, like, if your mountain biking is the hard days, like if we think about this as training theory, where we have sort of our hard or moderate days, maybe those are 2 or 3 days at most of the week. And those could be on the road or the mountain or the gravel bike. We have all these other disciplines that, we can also sprinkle in there. A lot of the mountain bikers I work with now will do a lot of gravel instead of road, but we still need to be careful that those gravel bike rides start looking a bit more like a road ride in terms of how bumpy and how much vibration there is, how many surges there are, how much coasting there is. But really what I would look for is that Saturday, whatever type of intervals you're doing, moderate or hard, is maybe on the Saturday. And then Sunday would normally be that like endurance ride where there could be climbing in it, but I wouldn't pick that as the day that you're doing necessarily threshold intervals, the day after you did threshold intervals on your mountain bike, right? You would use the road ride to get in that endurance or low intensity ride the next day. And the framework that we often come back to is that sort of concept of high, low, off, where you have an off day and then you have a high intensity or moderate intensity day, and then you do a low intensity day, and then usually you take like a bit of a rest day, or there's other ways you can sort of arrange it that are a little different, but usually that's the rough idea, is that we have these, what Dan Cleather would call a hot day, or like the day that's going to push you, and those days you sort of plan first, and then you arrange easy days or off days around those days for skill training, for recovery, for endurance adaptations. But they're always arranged around these hot sessions that Dan always says are like the thing you want to really protect, are those two key workouts, right? Joe Friel used to call these breakthrough workouts. So you'd put a little BT on the workout. They don't really do that anymore, but it would be these two workouts that the athlete would sort of have this indicator that they should really show up on those days. So I think that's a good concept. So with mountain biking then, especially as we get close to the main race, those interval sessions, the fast sessions, should start looking more and more like your mountain bike race, whatever type of mountain bike race that is. So it might be a big, long Leadville ride. It might be short mountain bike intervals on your XCO bike. Cyclocross racers would be similar. Like it should start looking more like cross practice where we're doing cyclocross styled stuff. And then the other days of the week are supporting that. They are helping the body feel better. They're not breakthrough workouts. They're not hot sessions. They're not these key workouts.
Okay. I have a wrinkle to add to this.
Sure.
Someone who is a mountain biker, but is maybe not technically skilled. How would this answer change? So if someone actually would struggle to do their harder days on the mountain bike, like I would put myself in that category, right? Like I'm not that fantastically technically skilled, so I would have a really hard time doing a truly hard ride on the mountain bike. So I think there, on one hand, if I'm planning on racing mountain bikes, I guess at some point I do need to be trying to go hard on the mountain bike. But on the other hand, I can go harder on the road bike. So from a fitness perspective, the road bike makes more sense. But does it?
Right. Yeah. I would say your first thought there was that like at some point you're going to have to come to the like, what do they call it? Is that a crucible? You're going to have to come to the point where you are tested. And the problem is if you haven't experienced speed and exertion off road, you haven't been in the environment, this is where we end up with a problem on race day. So we would want to train towards that. And so initially, if you think about this as the base phase, the general preparation phase, maybe we do have a separate sort of skills training day, and then maybe you have an interval training day, and then maybe there's still that endurance day built in. But then we would have to start edging you towards things that look a bit more technical. And that could easily look like, just because we're riding our mountain bike doesn't mean, I always say, like, if you watch a World Cup mountain bike race, look at how the stuff they're climbing on. These days, it rarely looks like even a mountain bike course when they're going uphill. It usually looks like maybe a gravel, but like sometimes road. It's often on grass. Like if you think about Mount St. Anne, which is one of the most technical mountain bike races, most of the climbs are actually on like gravel track or grass, like grass that's been worn down to like a path, right? And so we can still climb up something, and then that person might have a little skill challenge on the way down so that they're breathing a little hard. And we need to be careful, but this is the nature of sport training. There is risk. Gradually, we increase the challenge that they do. So the jump might just be a tiny jump that they have to do, or a pump track. And then eventually that has to start having a jump that they actually have to do. I really like doing tricks in the races. So then eventually, while I'm doing my intervals, I also have to do tricks on my downhill. And that's fun as well, right? So that would be the way I would think about it, is that eventually we do need to get it where you can find some exertion and get out there and practice it. But I don't think that's uncommon that people would then like sort of regress to doing their training on the indoor trainer because it's perfect and they need to always be tuning their engine, and then forgetting that like they're going to wrap their engine around a tree the first time they go out and race mountain bikes.
Okay, there we go. So all that to say, if I'm coming back to cyclocross next fall, I'm going to need to ride my cyclocross bike.
Yeah. And I think if we take Dan Cleather's look at this, Dan Cleather just had a couple new, or I guess he has had a couple new books, but maybe one new book since we last spoke to him. But his little black book of training would talk about things like this, where we can certainly have skill or technique training, tactical training in the week as well, right? Where we can really focus down on something. So if someone was trying to get better at riding berms and like flowy trails, you could certainly include that in your training. That might be part of a bigger ride, or it might be its own separated session. And I think sometimes cycling training is really, I don't know, we're like really weird with cycling training sometimes, that like everything has to be a 5-hour training session and you can only train once in a day. But every other sport in the world trains 2 and 3 times a week. 2 and 3 times a day. If you look at rowers, runners, there's often these multiple sessions. Some of them are just short core power plyometric training. Some of them might be a warm-up technique session. Some of them, right? Like that's, every other sport does this. So this is where sometimes I really prefer to do things like double days, where it gives us the freedom that like in the morning we can go to the pump track and learn how to do the pump track. And then in the afternoon we can go do an endurance ride on the road. And then the next day again, we could do intervals and then do an endurance ride or something in the afternoon. And that's a little bit elite training, but even a lot of my masters, this is going to be quick core workout in the morning, technique training in the afternoon, interval training in the morning, strength training at noon at in the work gym or something like that. I guess triathletes would be very familiar with this, right? Every triathlete in the world does doubles they fit it in the morning, the swim, and then they do their run at lunch, right?
There's a reason triathlon kind of sucks.
Well, I don't know. It's the only part I think I like about triathlon is the ability to do double and triple days.
It's easier for you because you don't really need to like clean up or extensively get dressed and showered and whatnot post workout. So
there is that.
I deeply understand the struggle of like not wanting to do double days. Although I do like my little easy morning core situation.
Yeah,
it doesn't get you
from that perspective. So if that's what I only have this 1 hour in the day, there's still in your warm up. Again, cycling is weird. Sometimes we include things like pedal drills or something where we do a little bit of fast pedaling. But you could also include technique drills in your warm up. And again, we can start embedding this. Sometimes we also like to really compartmentalize our training. Maybe I've just been doing that. But we could also, again, embed that. We go on our mountain bike ride, and then during the mountain bike ride, we find a nice stretch of trail where we can really go hard for 30 seconds. We call this our high intensity interval training. And then in between that, we focus on being smooth and flowing back down the trail.
Okay, there we go.
And I think, again, the initial point I started with is that this it doesn't matter where it came from, but this idea that mountain bikers are taking over road. I don't know if that is exactly true, but we are seeing some of these athletes that do both. And the question would be like, why? If that's true, what is it? And it's probably that they can deal with all these decisions and changes and just manipulating the bike around. So when they go to the road, we've talked about Noah Ramsey winning that Zwift Academy, and now he's in the Pro Peloton, and people saying, wow, like, you know how to ride your bike. And was it because he was a mountain biker and he's just used to complete chaos, like 100 people trying to get into a single track, going as hard as you possibly can, and then having to do a massive jump and rock drop beside a bunch of other people while people are screaming at you. And so maybe when you get into a road peloton, which is also chaotic and I wouldn't want to be there, maybe you can deal with that chaos and those decisions better, right? And the rest of us, the normal people, like our lives, our competition isn't quite that chaotic and high class, I guess, but we have elements of that, right? So I think that is where the mountain biking training, the off-road training, the gravel training, I think that is where something that we could almost rephrase this question where it's like, should road riders be doing more off-road, like quote unquote, imperfect training?
All right, I like it. Okay, before we get into our next question, quick pause to thank our sponsor over at Payable. So Payable is this lovely add-on that lets you take payments in a Google form, which sounds like a thing you should already be able to do, but it wasn't until Payable hit the scene.
That's right. And all you're doing is you take a PayPal, Square, Stripe account, you choose whatever one you want, and then you're going to basically sync that using Payable to your Google form. So if you're trying to collect money for a student pizza party,
parking passes.
They're doing at school. Yeah, we've said parking passes that people have done. You're going to just do that, and then basically what happens is they find out the information they need from the form. The person can submit their payment just like any other checkout, and then that money arrives in your PayPal, Square, whatever account you choose, and then you can do whatever you want with it from there. But it really, for these nonprofits, these volunteer jobs, these on-the-side things, these side hustles, it really enables you to do this and really minimizes your administration work.
Yeah, it's super, super useful, whether you're taking payments in real life and just need an easy way to be able to take them. If you're, collecting for donations, if basically anything where you don't necessarily want to create an entirely new website. You don't want to deal with frankly, Squarespace, etc., Shopify, whatnot. This is just such an easy, simple way to get your business or your whatever small thing you have off the ground. You can find some of our favorite templates and save some money on some of your fees that are associated with it. Although the nice thing is there's no subscription. You only have this tiny little fee if and when you get paid. So it's super convenient. You can find that at payableapps.com/athlete. So payableapps.com/athlete. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Okay. Getting faster without chasing every interval. So this is a common one, right? We get asked all the time, what's the interval I should be using to get faster? In this case, this rider averages around 20 to 25 kilometers per hour on gravel. Over the winter, what interval types are most effective for moving that toward a consistent 23 to 28 kilometers per hour without necessarily trying every single workout? under the sun.
Yeah, I mean, this is relatively quick. If it is gravel, this is quick. I'm wondering if this actually was on gravel that the speeds are from, but it doesn't matter. We want to get faster, I guess, is the ultimate question. It doesn't really matter what the speeds are.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, that's what I was going to say is I would caveat this as I often question when we're talking about average speed, how much that metric actually matters. Because actually, I was just doing a piece for Runner's World on resolutions that coaches wish you would stop making. And our good friend Matt Fitzgerald, who's been in the running triathlon space for decades, his thing was he wanted people to stop thinking about average speed because it makes you avoid hills.
Right.
And I was like, oh, that hurts, Matt, because that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so he's really saying pace as well. Runners are really focused on pace. So compared to cycling, runners actually are really into paces, so that mathematically they're also into speed. Just it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, partially because we don't have power as runners, really. So cyclists have heart rate and power and speed. Runners really only have heart rate and speed. So I guess like my first question within this question is really just, what are we training for? Why are we trying to up our speed necessarily? Is that actually the thing? Or is that just kind of a way to talk about improving our fitness with an interval? And I'm maybe reading too much into the concept of average speed. But I wanted to add the caveat that average speed should never be really your be all end all for cycling metrics.
Yeah, and so what this person might notice, and it's funny, Dan Proulx, who was the national coach for cycling for a long time in Canada, he would always pick on me because I would always be talking about the average speed for our mountain bike races in Ontario. And why, like, I would always talk about it because it would cluster. It would be like you couldn't win if you couldn't go over, I think it was 20 kilometers an hour. And then over the years, it's gotten faster and faster. We actually just had the fastest Ontario Cup this past spring because we had people like Noah Ramsey and Tyler Orschel and the Clark brothers were all there. And so it was like a little mini World Cup in a lot of ways. And so they went, I think it was 26 kilometers per hour on mountain bikes. For about an hour 35, I think it was the total race time. And so super fast. And the terrain is fast like that. But it's interesting that like over time, when you start looking at every race and you just say like, what is the average speed? It just is every time an O Cup happens, unless the couple venues that were hillier or rockier or muddier, obviously that slows down the speed. And that's what we're talking about. Speed is not reliable as a one-off. But when you start looking at every O Cup in history and you see that there's 3 that might have been won under 20 kilometers an hour, say. There's probably a couple other slow ones over the years or muddier ones. And then you're seeing that gradually over time, if you graphed out all the average speeds, they're actually gradually increasing over time on average, most of them. We keep seeing faster and faster and faster. And some of the older riders that were at the top when I raced, they said, well, the technology's changed, Peter. Like we used to have no suspension and our tires were at 60 PSI. The bikes were really bad, but they were still very fit. Some would say maybe even fitter. I don't know. That's like another debate. But so technology has actually made speed improve. And then also now we have these sustainable tracks. I talked about the World Cups now are on like gravel, crushed gravel path and this other stuff. So when we say that the speeds are getting faster, it's not just the athlete that's changed. Maybe we're fueling, maybe we're not starving ourselves anymore, but we can see that there's all these elements that have made the average speed of these mountain bike races increase. So if we take that random example I've given you and we apply it to this person who's riding gravel, we think, and they're saying as a solo rider on their own, they want to improve their speed. So I immediately think like it's not just fitness and the intervals, which I'll talk about in a second, but it's all of what Dan John calls the ALs. So we have the nutritional. Are you fueling these rides? Probably not. I don't want to judge this individual, but like often that's what I see is someone's new. If they're asking about speed, often it means someone's newer. They only have their bike computer, so they don't have power. They don't have these other elements that people start getting into, even heart rate.
Or even if they have them, they're still looking at speed as their primary indicator.
Mm-hmm. Then we're thinking tactical, which I would include like, I always say aerodynamical, which is not a word, but flappy vests, if you're a newer cyclist, often like getting more aero. Like I would only ride my Trek Kool-Aid drinking always tells me that my Trek aerodynamic helmet makes me, I think it saves me like 8 watts or something. So I go faster for the same amount of power. So without getting fitter, and I wear my Trek helmet, in theory, that helmet makes me faster. Now, I might just believe that it makes me faster, but that would be the psychological, another L, that makes me faster. So we don't have flappy vests. We have maybe an aero helmet. We have what else? Fueling. So we're going to fuel the work if we want to go fast and we're pushing our limits.
Technical. So,
okay. Yeah.
Especially because we're talking about gravel here. So cornering, going over tiny little climbs, going over sustained climbs, descending, etc.
Yep. Yeah. People drop so much time. They're really cautious on descents. They maybe lose traction up climbs. There's corners. Maybe they're being really timid on corners. And then that would then lead us into mechanical.
Oh, good. I was going to say equipmical, and I was like, that's not a real word.
Mechanical. So tires are obviously important. You can go really deep on rolling resistance, but I would say for gravel, we're also thinking like, are your tires pumped up too much? And you actually should have a lower pressure so that you're not getting bumped around. But and then also you can corner better and you have better traction on climbs and descents. So that could be the actual tire you choose, but also the setup. What else? What else are we missing?
I mean, I think those are all kind of the main ones, especially if we're talking just solo riding. We haven't even talked about if you're in a race and riding with other people, being able to draft, all that kind of fun stuff. But let's just say we're talking about just this rider wanting to be faster in general. So I think, go down that list and see, are there any big rocks that we can move there?
Yes. And definitely there's going to be something in there. Now, the solo thing I want to pick on a little bit. Now, Molly is I would say both Molly and I are people that like to exercise, move on our own mostly. But the tactical element to going faster is definitely a thing. If you're with other people, you're going to go faster, A, because they're pushing a little faster, but also because you can draft, and you may have to learn to draft, which is technical and tactical. But that would be another factor. And that either can affect you just are going faster and goals achieved, or if your goal is actually on this route, I want to go faster, riding with other people might make you fitter. I know for me, it pulls me out to ride longer or more often. Our friend Jody is always pulling me out, which I'm always thankful for, to ride longer or to go out an extra day of the week. So that's where the solo part of this question actually catches my eye, that like, if you want to go faster, it often involves a bit of group riding. Even if it's not your favorite thing, that might be your interval training for the day or your like high intensity or high focus day of the week.
Which I think gets into this question, as we said, of underlying motivation. So as usual, it would be very helpful to have this person asking the question on the call, like a Fraser Crane style radio show where we actually get to keep asking them these probing questions. Because I do think the why there really matters. Because if you just want to speed up, if you just want to improve your average speed, get a faster rider to sit in front of you and go 5 kilometers faster for your entire ride. However, if your goal is actually to get fitter and say like lose weight,
like work
burn
harder,
more calories, which, you know what, I recognize this person didn't ask that question, but I think very often when you dig deeper, I'd say a lot of the time that's one of the key motivators. Especially when you're talking about solo riders.
So you think that they think if they go faster,
they're going to burn more calories. They're going to, potentially drop more weight. And again, that's just how I read it. This might be a bit of a New Year's bias that I have because often...
You have written a lot of New Year's articles.
One of the most common resolutions is weight loss. I am not in any way condoning this or suggesting this should be, but I do always question like what the actual motivation for a question like this is. Do you actually want to get faster? Because there's very easy ways to do that. Mm-hmm. Or is there another reason you want to get faster? And faster is just your shorthand for something that you don't necessarily want to say, like burning more calories.
So we've talked about, I think, the motivation makes sense. I think that's a great thought. So maybe what we could now say, so we've sort of said, these are lots of ways you can get faster. We've looked at the solo element, again, maybe pulling in some other people that might achieve the goal or help you achieve your goal if you do want to do it solo. Then I want to go back to this idea of like kilometers per hour or speed is not a great metric for assessing your improvement. I think taken over time on the population level, like if we just look at all your rides, all 2024, you never went faster than 30 kilometers an hour on a ride and you averaged this. And then the next year you had a couple rides that were 31 kilometers an hour and you averaged 1 kilometer faster. That's like an interesting, like across the year as like a big bunch of data. But any one ride, we know that it could be windy or you just felt tired or you had a flat and you rode a flat for all the time. Like that means that speed is not as important. And that's where the wattage, the power and the heart rate and these different metrics, time can be more valuable for tracking our training. So when we train people, I never look at speed really. Like sometimes I'll just look to see, the odd person will set like I want to do a 1 kilometer or a what is that, the 1 hour time trial, and they're trying to get 30 or 40 kilometers per hour, something like that. So sometimes speed is relevant. It still exists, but it's just not very common because of how variable it is. So what this person might actually do is say, on this loop, I want to be able to complete this loop in this amount of time or at this average speed. It's the same thing, just doing the math a little differently, right? And that's normalizing this testing that they want to do, this goal they have a little bit. So not just every ride, I want to ride 30 kilometers an hour. That's, as Molly said, that's going to keep you from doing hilly rides, fun, adventurous rides. That's not what we want. It's pulling us in the wrong direction. But if we can say once a month, you're going to go do this hill or this loop and you want to do it in this time or faster, now that's something that we can really test and make progress on. We love, close to us, we have a nice loop of the Nottawa Loop, anyone near Collingwood. And that's a loop we do 3 times. And we see how fast we can do that. But we often will stay under 75%, almost like a zone 2 test, right? And then the other one we do is just the local hill test. Whatever your local hill is, I don't even really care how long it is, as long as it's maybe longer than 30 seconds. Probably want this to be more up in the 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 minute type of hill if we can. Tell me how fast you get up it. And still there's these elements that we talked about, all the owls. So mechanical, if your bike gets lighter and you leave your bottles at the bottom of the hill, you'll probably go a little faster. But then what are you going to do? Then you're going to have to figure it out again. But those would be the things that I would say to see that you're improving. And I think, as Molly said, is it weight? Is it just, I want to see improvement in 2026? I think that's, to me, that's, this person wants to see that they're improving. And I would say we can keep an eye on the average speed. I don't even know how you say that. The average speed of your rides across the year, maybe would be the way to say that. But I think what you want to start moving towards is more of this like controlled testing environment. Even if it's a field test where it's for this 10 kilometer route, I can do it in this time. For this 6-minute hill or this certain hill close to my home, I climb it in 6 minutes and 20 seconds. And then next month I did it in 5:59. Oh, wow, I got 20 seconds faster. That to me are good indicators that someone's getting better at cycling.
Yeah. And I mean, to answer the main question regarding what kind of interval to be doing, I think we're going to really go with any interval is really the answer. But I'm looking at this and I'm hearing averaging roughly 20 to 25 kilometers per hour on gravel. My question is, are you ever going hard or easy, right? Mm-hmm. This sounds a lot like the person is kind of always in that zone 2.5, right? That It's a little bit over endurance pace. So what we used to call junk miles, and nothing's junk mile. I don't believe in junk miles, but no. That's, if you want to get faster, that's not the pace to be going, right? Well, we want the easy rides to be easy. We want the interval rides to be pushing that pace. So you're not going to have this consistent, like beautiful average speed, because on the easier days, you're going easier. On the hard days, you are going harder, but then you're going easier between intervals. Mm-hmm. You're adding hills, so that's going to slow you down.
Right.
You kind of almost have to get over the idea of speed in order to get faster. Well,
and you're right. So maybe this person started and this is what they resulted, and they got faster and faster, but now they found their plateauing. So they were a beginner, anything works for 6 weeks, and now they're finding, okay, but what do I do now? And so Molly's point is maybe we do endurance rides where we just ride by heart rate, under 75%, conversational pace, ride for longer than usual if you have the time, but easy. So don't even look at your speed. We don't care. Now that might creep up on its own, but don't look at it. You're just going to go out and ride by heart rate, by feeling, for longer if you can. At least 90 minutes if you can. I do think as we get over 90 minutes, magical things start happening in cycling. And then the other thing, if we're going to stick with speed and say intervals, I would say if you're doing a flat, whatever this course is on that you're doing this measurement on, that's when I'd go out and I'd say, go and ride for like 30 kilometers an hour or faster, and see how long can you hold that, and then see then take a break when it starts getting hard and you can't do it anymore. So maybe that's for 6 minutes or 7 minutes, and then we do those for maybe we do those 3 of those or something like that. We start building 20, 30, maybe a bit more minutes where we're working over the goal pace. And then I would say that you'd smash right through that. But again, we don't quite know what the exact test is that they're doing. But if we're going to do intervals by speed, that's what I would think about, is something like that. As far as Molly says, almost polarizing the training away from that goal pace a little bit, which is a little counterintuitive.
Well, I'd also just love to see the person set another goal.
Right.
It can, you can still have this average speed pace, but I'd like to see another goal on top of it that kind of pushes you to get outside of just that flat ride going faster and faster.
Well, and that, what could a goal be? Go out on the group ride. A lot of people want to go up through the different levels of their local group ride, or they want to finish a big route, a bike packing trip, some of these things that are using this cycling ability to do something. And then, as I mentioned, you can use the field tests, the little loop that you do a time trial on, and out and back you do a time trial on, the local hill you do a hill TT on. That's going to give you a sense of whether you're improving and something to sort of chip away at. And even those can be intervals, right? We have our TT hill. Well, now we just go a little slower and we do it 3, 4, 5 times, working towards eventually testing again. But as Molly said, I think the key there is that we're not testing the average speed every single ride we ride. That can be like a once a month or once every 2 months test that you do. But the rest of the days, you don't want to use that metric as your like be all end all of every ride. That's sort of like an assessment on the side.
Perfect. And if you want to talk through a better set of goals and this average speed concept, feel free to book a coaching consult. We'll include a link to that in the show notes. I think we're going to wrap up there. So we'll get to creatine in our next episode. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited for 2026, and we will catch you next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.